In this video, I'm going to let you know what sort of production capacity your brewery needs so it matches up nicely with the number of taps you plan to have in your brew pub. Let's get brewing. G'day, I'm Hendo, I'm from Rockstar Brewer. I help professional brewers from all over the world that are having startup and growing pains to brew award-winning beer. If you want to know more about that, check out my free training over at rockstarbrewer.com/free training. Many potential brewery owners come to me with their dream of starting their very own brewery. And why wouldn't you? Making craft beer is the best job in the world. So when you start a craft brewery, one of the key decisions that you have to make is you have to work out how many taps your tasting room or your brew pub is going to have. So early in the brewery planning process, the creative juices start flowing and there's lots of different beer ideas that you want to take to your consumers. And the excitement of creating all these different styles of beer means that you're going to want to take them to your consumers all at once. But if you don't align your brewery's production capacity with a reasonable expectation of the number of taps that you have in your tap room, then this can mean that you wind up with some dry beer lines in your brew pub. And that just means you're leaving money on the table. All of these decisions relate to what's called new product development. And it's one of the 9 accelerators I teach in my paid program, which is called the Rockstar Brewer Implementation Program. If you don't have your brewery's production capacity aligned with the number of taps that you plan to have in your brew pub, then you can lose sales by having dry beer lines. Or worse still, you've got to get beer in from another brewery around the corner, which significantly reduces your margins. Is this a problem that you're facing whilst you're trying to design and plan your brewery? If so, don't forget to subscribe to the channel because I've got loads of other videos on how to build a brewery. Meet Phil. Phil's looking to start a brew pub and has loads of awesome beer ideas that he wants to take to his thirsty consumers. He wants 20 taps in his brew pub, each with a different beer. And apart from the cider tap, where he plans to buy the cider from a local cidery, the remaining 19 taps will be all his to fill with his delicious beer. Phil has calculated a 21-day or 3-week tank residence time. Tank residence time is simply the number of days elapsed between brew day and packaging. It's the number of days that a beer has residence inside a tank. All of his tanks are going to be 10 hectolitre or 10 barrel for simplicity, and that Phil's brewhouse is also going to be a 10 hectolitre or 10 barrel brewhouse. He's able to brew 2 brews per day, Monday through Friday, so that's up to 10 brews per week. Phil's also looking to buy 4 10 hectolitre or 10 barrel tanks from his stainless steel fabricator. By using this scenario, it makes it much easier to determine both production capacity and the number of beers that Phil can simultaneously produce. You'll also notice I'm not concerned with the brewhouse or its size. Brewhouse size is largely irrelevant when determining a brewery's production capacity, and I discuss this further in this video. A rough way to work out your brewery's total annual output based on the assumptions above, simply apply this formula. Add up the total volume of all of your fermentation tanks. Multiply that by 52 weeks, and then divide that by 3 for our 3-week residence time. Then multiply that number by 0.9 for a maximum of 90% production capacity, and voila, you've worked out your total potential production volume. So in Phil's brewery, he can produce up to 62,000 litres or 620 barrels per year. The next thing we need to work out is the number of batches that Phil can produce per month. This tells us the number of batches of beer and therefore the maximum number of different types of beer he can produce in a month. So here's how to calculate it. Take the number of tanks you plan to have, multiply that by 52 weeks, and then divide that by 3 for our 3-week residence time. Multiply that number by 0.9 for our 90% maximum capacity, and this gives you the total number of batches that you can produce per year. Divide that number by 12 months, and you'll get the number of batches per month that Phil can brew. So on his brewery, he can produce up to 62.4 batches of beer per year. That's about 5 batches per month on average. So here's the problem with Phil's business plan. He's basically got 19 taps that he needs to fill with his own beer, and he can only produce 5 batches of beer per month. And so that basically means that it's going to take him almost 4 months running at maximum capacity just to fill all of those beer lines. That's a lot of dry beer lines and a lot of money left on the table during the first crucial few months of his brewpub's operation. So how can we resolve this issue and fill all 19 taps quickly? So if we were to resolve this issue, the logical answer would be to add more tanks, right? So let's add 2 more tanks to Phil's brewery. He's now got 6 10 hectolitre or 10 barrel tanks. Let's take the number of tanks that he plans to have, which is now 6, multiply that by 52 weeks, divide that by 3 for our 3-week residence time, and then multiply that by 0.9 for our 90% maximum capacity. This now gives Phil a total of 94 batches of beer that he can produce per year, and that's about 8 batches per month. So while his ability to brew more batches of different beer increases, it'll now take him just 2.5 months to fill all 19 of his beer taps. It's still not ideal, but it's better than 4 months. So even if we add those 2 additional tanks to Phil's brewery, he still faces some problems. So basically, Phil might not have the space to be able to add those 2 extra tanks. If he adds more tanks, then that means that there's less capacity for patrons who are paying money for the beer. And potentially that'll cost you sales. So even though Phil has got beer in all 19 of his taps, some of those beers are going to sell really, really well. And some of those beers might not move so quickly. For those beers that are really fast movers, he'll actually need to rebrew them because he doesn't want to run out. So assuming Phil has 4 really high volume selling beers, it means he's going to have to rebrew them. So rebrewing those 4 high volume beers is really important because they're his biggest sellers and he wants to keep those taps flowing at all times. So now, even though we've got those 6 tanks in Phil's brewery and having to rebrew those high volume beers, it's still going to take him those 4 months to fill all 19 of those taps. So by having to rebrew those 4 flagship beers, that's going to cut into the number of unique beers that Phil's able to brew. So in this scenario, even with Phil's 6 tanks instead of 4, it's still going to take him 4 months to fill all 19 of the taps in his brewpub. He'll also be sitting on a large amount of slow-moving beer. This eats into your cash flow and means that your money's tied up in finished beer. This also means that he'll need a large amount of cool room capacity to store all those kegs. And this doesn't take into account that Phil might want to put his beer into cans so that he can boost takeaway sales. So the number of taps that you plan to have in your tasting room directly relates to the production capacity of your brewery, both in terms of total volume output as well as the number of unique beers that you can have on at any one time. So in Phil's case, if he was to reduce the number of taps in his tasting room from 20 down to 10, he can still have his cider tap, and he's only got 9 taps that he needs to keep wet all the time. And the best way to approach that is to have lots of seasonal beers that just come and go. So when one beer runs out, a new one comes in. And that actually turns into a really good experience for consumers because every time they visit the tap room, there's always something new to try. He'll also preserve his cash flow and create a really sustainable brewing business. If you want to know more about rapid new product development and all the other problems that a startup brewery needs to solve, check out my free training at rockstarbrewer.com/free training. Thanks heaps for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.